So we are at the hour, and we want to be prompt. So those of you who are on time, and appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and get started a little bit. Let me start by just saying welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is the HFI Hangout. We have three speakers today who are each going to give just a very quick little chat, a little snapshot of a bigger conversation. And most of the point of this is just, we call it a hangout. It is really a casual way for us to all hang out and chat. So we invite you to ask questions. You can ask questions on the topics that we're speaking about. You can also ask other questions that are on other UX kinds of topics. Floor will be fairly open to that, but we'll wait for the questions until after those talks that we've given. You'll see that under the participant panel, there's a little thing that says raise hand. And so you'll be able to use that. When you raise your hand, that will put you up at the top of the attendees list for us. And then we will select you after the speakers have all given our little chats. And as we did with that last person, we'll put you in the room and put you on video, and you'll be able to ask your question, and we can chat a little bit. So that's the overall kind of plan and structure. So thank you all for joining us. Let me also mention a couple of quick things about Zoom. It's worth noting that as we're sharing screens, in fact, Eric, do you want to share a screen if you have a first screen? I know you're going first.
Yeah, I can do that.
Once Eric shared a screen, you'll notice that our video panel kind of hovers above that. And so I just want to mention to you, you're able to move that. It's a very simple click and drag. You can click anywhere on that to drag it out of the way. So if it's covering something by accident, that's usually how that's set up. So if it's covering something by accident, you can drag that around. Just in case it's in the way. We tried to set up some of the slides so it's not in the way, but I did want to mention that. Also want to mention a quick hello and welcome to those of you who are joining us on Facebook. I want to mention those of you on Facebook, we won't be seeing your comments live. We're in the Zoom session focused on that. And so my apologies if we miss any comments or questions. Next time, maybe join us in the live session, but we're glad that you can join us and at least see the session. It's lovely to have you on for that. And let me also just remind, I mentioned this before, but some of you wouldn't have been on. We have a poll. I've already sent it. If you've already done it once, you don't need to do it again, but I'm sending it out one more time. Oh, I didn't do it right. Okay, I'm going to send that out now. I didn't send it out to all the attendees before. So this poll going out to all of you now in the chat box. If you'll kindly click on that, what that'll do for us is it will let us see where your role is right now. And the reason that helps us out is as we are doing this chat, it lets us know kind of what your role is, and that way we can speak at the right level. We don't get maybe too meta or too deep in the weeds in certain ways, or if we got a lot of people who are managers, we can speak more to management. So it just lets us tune things a little bit in that way. So that poll will be happening in a live way, and so please fill that out as much as you can. All right, so that's all the initial stuff, and I think we're ready to go. Eric, I'll ask you to go ahead and take it off.
Okay, thanks, Noah. So, hi, welcome. And we're going to have three of us chat a little bit here briefly about some ideas that are around the UX field. And I'd invite you to click on raise your hand if you have a question. After these three brief sessions, we're going to take questions. And I'm going to talk about AI in your career. And Noah, Apala, if you can go on mute, I think that would be good.
Sure.
Thanks. There we go. That's quieter. So as a UX professional, what your gig is to help technology move forward and be used in a way that's within people's limitations, fits in people's lifestyle. We're all about making technology work with people. And technology is having some interesting effects. So right now, there's a huge global issue. As technology gets stronger and stronger, there are massive sections of the population that have no work. And it's really having a huge negative impact. If you look in the US, factory work is taken over by robots. Even things like driving will soon be taken over by autonomous vehicles. Farming has long been just a few percentage points of people doing it. What do those people do? Do they start acting very negatively in many cases? And so when we think about our careers, we need to ask ourselves, is this a good career as technology moves forward? And that's a hard question. For many, many years, for decades, I would tell people, yeah, go into the computer programming field, good field to be in. And then about 10 years ago, I stopped that. And I stopped that because programming is something that's being taken over by the robots. Yeah, it's not physical robots like the Terminator, but you can go out to GitHub and just grab a routine. And now what used to be 25 people programming in COBOL is taken over by 1 or 2 people accessing that reusable code and modifying it. So what about UX? Is UX a good field to be in? Well, technology is exploding. And so if you look at the Nielsen-Norman group, they're saying that the need for UX people is going to expand exponentially. And you can see the curve there. And that's really impressive. My gosh. And I think they're probably wrong. So I don't believe in exponential curves. But certainly, we're going to need hundreds of thousands of UX people more. And that tells me that's a good field to be in. But there's something more. And that's that the UX field is one of the fields that's hard to see just becoming completely automated. Sure, one of the questions we might talk about is the kinds of technologies and the kinds of systems that will help UX people to do better in the future. And we're excited about that. But the field is not going to go away. And it's not going to go away because it requires us to understand a whole ecosystem of people, to have that context in order to understand people's feelings, empathy. These are hard things to build in with an automated system. Now, artificial intelligence, and one of the things that drives me nuts is I talk to companies that are like, we're an AI company. And in reality, they're not doing nothing but program some algorithm. AI is about creativity built into a computer system, a system that explores and finds ways of being better. And that you'll see that, so artists, if you create symphony and that's your job, you're like, a computer can never do that. But in reality, computers are creating symphonies. And we can build symphonies, computers building symphonies where the computer pays attention to how people react and improves the symphony. But that's not something that we're going to see with, for example, political commentary in Bob Dylan's kind of music, right? Because you need to understand the whole context and the emotions. And so we're kind of like that. So I believe the UX field is one which will be here throughout our lifetimes, your lifetimes as well as mine. But AI has an interesting aspect to it from our viewpoint. And that's that it's something that we are going to begin to design for. So we're helping all these technologies to integrate for people. And AI is one of the technologies. So what does a UX person do with AI? And I'm actually working on the courses right now, putting in some of the insights around it. But let me share with you a little bit how exciting it is. So what AI can let us do, let's take a banker. Bankers have built online vending machines forever, right? So you can go in, you can do a transaction, you can deposit money, all of that's clear. But what bankers have asked me for years and years is to personalize their facilities. Personalizing it means to them initially like, oh, you can create your homepage and you can redesign it. And of course, people didn't use that and it was a waste of time. So that kind of personalization didn't make sense, but the bankers had a good idea. The bankers had the idea that we wanted to have more of a banking kind of experience. Just like you have a human who gets to know you and sees whether you're in a good mood this morning and offers you things that might make sense. And AI lets us build that kind of capability in to our banking systems. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm going to pass it to Noah and let him talk about his idea.
Yep, this is Noah. Oh, and this is still up. But by the way, guys, this is the overall proportion. So mostly UX kinds of folks. Good to know. All right. So yeah, I'm going to chat with you guys about this kind of thing about getting perspective on the value of the kind of work that we're doing in UX, depending on which kind of work that you're doing that is UX work. And we do have this context, it's kind of looming bots and all of that, as Eric was talking about. That's part of the context. And the level of work we do is relevant. As you're doing lower value work, as you'll hear, that's stuff that can be more easily automated. But as we do higher, more meta work, work that has more larger kind of pattern recognition that we as humans are good at, then we are more uniquely positioned to do that work. And so we're able to beat the bots on those things. There's also a reason that we talk about the value of the UX work that's about culture. And I just want to take a moment with this because it's something I see so many of you burn with, especially for those of you who are on around this UX or people who are doing UX kinds of work. You're having this experience of it being seen as a luxury. Right? It's being seen as, oh, we paint some screens, we do a little tweaking, tuning there. And that perspective on UX, of course, it's seen as being a nice to have, a luxury, a good thing if you can do it, but really the real work is everyone else's stuff, right? And so as we can do higher and higher value work, we overcome this and we're able to be seen as more vital, and that's good. So overall, this thing I'm going to present is the value ladder, and it's about assessing the value of the work we do at our companies. I mostly focus on this for the value of understanding where we are at our companies from that perspective. That's kind of where my perspective is usually at. It lets me get a view of kind of what would the next higher kind of thing be, or the next thing among a few different options. It also gives you as UX practitioners a sense of the scope of the work that's available in UX. A lot of the time, I see companies think that UX really is just painting screens, or it's just only usability testing, and we need to broaden our horizons. So that's a lot of the point of this. Also, from your career standpoint, and this isn't the main reason I mention this, but from our career standpoint, the ladder is going to help you get a sense of ways that you can expand in terms of the work that you're doing from day to day. There's a whole other branch with this as well with your career that's thinking about things about moving into management. But as far as the actual work that we do, this helps to give some perspective about your career as well. And so this is the ladder. This is the overall view. If you've seen other versions of this before, we have updated it in some various ways. And so this is the latest version of it. You see here that we have kind of 4 different tiers. This grouping is very deliberate. I'm going to walk through these from the bottom up because I think that really helps you out. I see most people stuck at the bottom. And so I'll start with that. And you'll see here that I'm noting, by the way, some things you think of as for instance, types of search. Those things are really important, but they're generally parts of these different kinds of work because we always want research to be a part of something that we're doing towards a design. Right? So these are the things that we do that have a specific outcome, and then that's why they provide value, and that's why we frame it in this way. I'm going to talk at the start here about these bottom 2 tiers of the ladder, and the reason for that is because you kind of need this tier before we talk about maintenance. So real quick, right? So expert evaluation, you've heard of heuristic evaluation. I'm going in as an expert, applying best practices and saying, hey, what could be improved? Downside of this is we're seen as the peanut gallery, right? We're seen as, oh, that's just your opinion. At best, we're doing this from the perspective of a deep knowledge of the user and maybe even knowing user research and all of that. But we're still often seen as just kind of having an opinion. And so that's why it's often less valuable. Also, the kinds of feedback we can do with any kind of evaluation is really at the level of, I know there's a problem. And in particular, the solutions, especially the highest importance, most valuable solutions. Is this thing that people even want? Is this a thing that fits with how people expect to use it? Can people find things? Things like that. We can tell you that there are problems, but we often don't know the solutions. And so that's why an expert evaluation is valuable, but there are more valuable things. A usability test is very similar to an expert evaluation in that it's, well, an evaluation. But what's different about that, of course, is we're sitting with users. So it's a little harder for the rest of the organization to ignore, but still really valuable. It still has that downside, though, where I can find, oh, there are problems with users finding things, but I don't know how to fix that, right? We need to design a navigation for that. And so that'll be a higher tier level kind of a thing to do. All I know is there's a problem with it at that level. There are some things that'll be more obvious fixes. Oh, this was clearly the wrong word. Clearly they wanted this other word, but very often we don't know the right solution. A small step up from that is detailed design, doing mock-ups, right? Another thing, and actually that first question we had, hi, it was, what was his name, Vivek? Hi, Vivek. That's what you're doing there is mock-ups. Still very low tier kind of work. And the problem with that, again, it's not research driven. And again, we're doing work that is screen by screen kinds of detailed design. I'm not doing that navigation level. And just, I keep mentioning navigation, right? We find that navigation is 80% of observed usability problems. That's why I keep harping on it. It's a big deal. And so here, all we can do is this little detail stuff. Think of, I can help with the amount of white space and where I put the white space. I can help with things about left side alignment and the size of text. There's all kinds of stuff that I can help with, but those things don't have the same kind of impact that we have with that higher value stuff. Now, having said all of that, I want to mention maintenance. Now, maintenance is actually a tier down. It's what I see as the lowest tier, and there's some disagreement that can be had about maybe it's a little higher value, but the point is that maintenance is basically, in terms of what you're doing, very similar to these other things. In particular, what it really usually looks like is expert evaluation and detailed design, but done outside of the larger scale development kind of process. So here with maintenance, I'm doing the business as usual stream stuff. It's very hard to move up in value from there because you're not even in the flow of creating stuff at that point. So that's that maintenance level. And yeah, very similar kinds of practices. I'm evaluating things and fixing them. I'm creating new designs that are little tiny designs. It is important work, right? These are all four of these are things that there's a lot of this kind of work to do. It is important, but the value of it is smaller, right? The ROI is smaller than those other things. And more importantly, if you're at that lowest tier, at this lowest tier that we just talked about, right? Either of these two lower tiers, then you need to think about ways that you can expand it and include other types of work also, right? We don't generally only do the higher tier work. We need those lower tiers, but it's important to know that. So the next tier up is this kind of architecture level. And what's different about this architecture level is you need to be in sooner. If you're at that one of those lower tiers I just talked about, you probably have said, if I was only involved sooner, I could have a bigger impact. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do an earlier usability test or I'm going to do in the user-centered analysis class is that user interface structure and the process we do for creating that. This is that navigation component. This is how you create a navigation. And the fundamental thing we're trying to do is understand the user's expectations in terms of navigation and fit those expectations. If you've heard of an information architecture, very similar to that, but it also has the design layer on top of that that represents it. So that we're not just saying, hey, what's the buckets that we put things into and where do we label those buckets in the navigation? We're also planning how that looks on the screen. Am I doing a top nav? Am I doing an index menu? How is it going to look? Exactly how is that laid out? Plan out some layouts, some landing screens, all of those pieces. So this is that information architecture kind of piece of things that we call a user interface structure. This I want to emphasize because this is what I see the most companies fail at. This is where I see the most companies fall down, have the most trouble. It is a huge gap that a lot of companies really need to fill. And I want to emphasize that this needs to happen before you start sprint zero. This needs to happen before we get into those detailed design cycles, the agile sprints, and that's part of why it's such a hard thing for companies to do this.
No, people are saying you're speaking too fast for them to understand.
Shoot. Okay. Sorry, we were given 6 minutes, and I'm trying to fit a lot of content in. Okay. I'm going to slow down a little bit and go over a touch faster, or a touch longer. Okay. What I'm saying is that this information architecture piece of things is critical. This is where most companies fall down, right? So big deal, very important. And trying to think of it, how I want to, sorry, I got derailed just a little. But yeah, so this is really, really critical where most companies fall down. The thing I want to emphasize about this also is it's not a thing where I sit and think about it. This isn't a thing where I ask a designer to design a screen. Right? This is a thing where we do a research-driven process, where we say, hey, I need to sit and do a whole bunch of user interviews to understand my users' mental models. And then I create a design, and then we normally usability test that design to refine it. So it's a serious kind of process, and all of that has to happen. That's normally an 8 to 12-week process. When HFI does it, we're very efficient about it, but it still takes 8 to 12 weeks, and that's something that we do that's something that 8 to 12 or 6 to 8. I may be thinking of a different thing. Eric, you'll have to correct me. But this is something that we do before we start sprint zero. That's the critical piece. And it's it's very easy for companies to overlook this because what you get out of it looks so small. It's like a handful of designs, but those designs are the whole deal almost for navigation. They're the 80% when you talk about the 80-20 rule, right? The 80% is not the first handful of low-hanging fruit things that I can fix using those lower tier things. This is the 80% that we do with 20% of the design. So this is the big deal thing. Also worth acknowledging, we have a whole process for creating a strategy for persuasion. Once we move into more persuasive design, emotional design kinds of stuff, then we need to have a strategy for that. So we call that the PET architecture process. We teach this as part of our CXA stuff. PET stands for persuasion, emotion, and trust. And it's that whole world of emotional design, persuasive design. I won't go into deeply here, but it's a similar level of value. So that was that second tier. This next tier, someone asked what comes before Sprint Zero. So the user interface structure, and both of these things, both the persuasion strategy and user interface structure, those are things that we want to be finishing just before we get to the start of Sprint Zero. And the reason for that is the user interface structure, understanding that navigation is going to be critical before we start selecting which user stories I do. I need to have a vision of what the product is going to look like overall, what that design is going to look like overall. So that's a critical piece of this. Okay, so I'm hearing a question about how you get out of the first tier, and so I'm gonna hold that question until later because I'm already pushing time a little bit. Thank you for your patience, other panelists, Eric and Apala. So real quick, then the last tier, just so I'm giving you again the point of this chat is just to give you the perspective. So then the next tier up from that is innovation and cross-channel strategy, and these are things that are outside of any individual design or product, and that's what's different about these. Innovation, long story short, if you've ever had that thing where you're creating the perfectly usable thing and you've really worked hard on how usable it is, maybe it's really persuasive also, but no one wants it. It's not valuable. It's not a thing anyone wants, right? That's the problem that innovation solves fundamentally. Lots of processes for innovation out there, and that's its own kind of world. HFI's process is my favorite of all the things I've seen, but the point is that doing innovation in a way that's user-centered, that starts with a clear, deep understanding of our users and driving from there is really how we want to do innovation. And so that is an even higher value thing we can do in UX. And then the other thing at the very top of that ladder is the cross-channel strategy, and it's about solving this problem where we have lots of different channels. Maybe we have the website and we have the mobile website, but you also might have a retail store and a call center, and you might have a kiosk and an app, and this is one where they have a thing like iTunes. How do they all fit together? And so this was a case that HFI did, and the long story short of it was that we really created a whole cross-channel strategy. But the point is that this is going to let us have a very clear vision of, for everything that a user does, where do they go, right? What's the brand across all those things and the image of that brand, that whole piece. You can see how this is having some crossover with some other areas like branding. It also has a whole persuasion component where it gives us a clear persuasive theme across all of those things. So this is that vision of a cross-channel strategy, even higher value, even more valuable and important, but it takes even more investment. So what you're seeing throughout the ladder is this relationship where, in order to do that higher value work, UX has to be involved sooner in both of these higher tiers, and it also has to be trusted more with things that were previously kind of assumed to be sometimes the domain, at least a little bit, of other groups. So that's part of that world. If you're in that world of feature-driven projects where every project starts with a bucket of features, right? We need to replace that with user interface structure. So that's some of that trust that we're talking about. So I hope that gives a little bit of perspective about what you're doing with UX. I hope that helps to give you that vision, and maybe I'll get to chat in the Q&A about how we climb it and things like that. Polly?
Hey, thanks, Noah. Eric, can you get my slides up, please?
You're there?
I'm not sure that you can hear me.
We can hear.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to switch tracks completely, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's the social impact of all these wonderful sort of designs that we work on, all the new things that are happening in terms of design? So, of course, this endless debate about, are we creating too much of a digital cocoon because we create such compelling immersive systems? And so are we losing touch with reality? Does that mean that we are losing touch with with who we really are, our whole potential of dealing with frustration, with conflict, all the unpredictability that the real world brings with it? The digital world is all about, getting everything at the click of a button. So is that really good? So there's debate about that. There's debate about all the e-commerce sites, etc. As designers, we create more and more persuasive designs. And of course, that means people buy more and more stuff. Maybe they don't really need all that much stuff. Is that really a good thing to create such wonderfully persuasive design? So, all of that, some of the topics that you will, I'm sure, have been reading about in terms of design and what designers need to think about. But I'm going to talk about one particular aspect, and that comes from economics, and it's called facile externality. What it really means is that, we all work on the fundamental idea that efficiency is everything. Efficiency is God. Efficiency is at the heart of development and progress. And so you'll see in usability, efficiency is one of the key success criteria. How efficiently can users navigate through their tasks, complete their tasks, and so on and so forth. And we've learned how to design for very efficient completion of a user's task. But you know what? Facile externalities sometimes less efficient, wait too much and make things too efficient and take away all the hassle, the problems of the real world, it can actually harm us in terms of the bigger picture. So for example, think about all the automated cars. I'm not talking about self-driving cars, but cars that have become more and more automated. And you can sort of, give control to the car to make sure that it brakes when it needs to, it picks up speed when it needs to, all by itself. And while you can then think about, things you have to do tomorrow and that really naughty problem that you need to find a solution to, all of this while the car's kind of driving itself. But you know what? At some point, suddenly you may need to intervene because this is not a completely self-driving car. And nor is it a car where you have full control. We've made it very efficient for the most part, but more accidents are reported because of the challenge that a driver in such a car has in getting back to that moment when he or she has to intervene than when drivers are distracted by talking on the mobile phone. So you know what? It's very efficient, but sometimes perhaps it is better to not make it that efficient. Or think about extreme cases such as gambling. So now you have machines, gambling machines in the casinos, where you could just set it on autoplay so that you don't really need to even bother to stop and put in more money and okay, the game's finished, now you start again, get the chips. Nothing. You can just put it on autoplay and you can just sit there, and as many times as you've set it to autoplay, it just goes on. There is not a moment of pause when perhaps the gambler has the opportunity to be in touch with reality and say, okay, enough. I am in real bad debt because I've lost every bit of money that I had today. No, that moment of pause and reflection isn't there because it's on autoplay, which is really efficient. But is it really efficient if you think about, all that you read in terms of what happens with gambling addiction? So this is what facile externality is about. And I think as designers, we need to think about it. If you look at this image here, of Domino's, the app for ordering Domino's pizzas. So we heard a few years ago, it seems like, a century ago, that, 3 clicks, everything has to be done in 3 clicks. It's got to be that efficient. And you better design all interactions so that it ends with 3 clicks. Then it was like 1-click ordering and it was wonderful. Now it's 0-click ordering. So if there is a particular kind of pizza that you order regularly, then you open the app and the pizza gets ordered. And is that really good? Well, it's certainly very efficient and it's innovative. Yeah. But can you move to the next slide? But it is, I think, very important, as several sociologists, several psychologists, even designers, certainly those in looking and exploring at how technology and society interact and what impact one has on the other. All of them have been writing about that perhaps we need, as designers, to introduce something called positive friction in order to break that super efficient way that we were designing, the experience that we were designing. Just inject pause, moments of pause, when you can rationally think whether you really want to spend that money, whether you really want to pop all those, what is this positive friction? So just two very well-known examples, and you may very well, you may know about these also. One is Monzo, digital bank. They have this philosophy, they talk about it all the time, about positive friction, which is, things like, okay, for weekend, I'm having a great time, I'm at the bar with lots of friends, and I just want to spend a little more and a little more. But you know what? The app draws my attention to the fact, you really don't have that much money. You're cutting it really fine because next week you have your insurance premium and you are not going to make it. I know you do expect some payments in, but it is very fine. So do you really want to? Ultimately, it's up to you, of course, as the user. And you can be, yes, just go ahead. I just want to blow all my money today. But you know what? It is giving you that minor moment of friction to say, okay, no, cut it out. Enough. I just can't take the risk. Or Tylenol, this is this is like, case study that has been talked about endlessly since they got the results. So what they did is they reduced the rate of suicides, Tylenol-related suicides, by 43%, just by changing the packaging from the bottle in which all the pills were, which is on the left, to the blister packs. And again, they talk about the moment of friction. So the penny pills, in that 1 second, when you're like, you want to kill yourself. But the blister pack, it has fewer pills, not enough to kill yourself with this one pack. Then you have to pop each one open individually. Each moment of friction gives you just that moment of pause to say, oh no, oh my God, what am I thinking? So that positive friction, I think, is very important for us to introduce in this, sort of the race to efficiency that we have, and keep in mind the concept of facile externality. Eric, could you go to the next slide, please? And here is, I think this is a sort of perfectly captures the essence of what I'm trying to say. So Airbnb, Steve Seltzer, as he said, that, as designers of these very immersive experiences, we need to consciously build in those moments of meaningful friction, because we want to encourage users to be aware of not just the action they're taking, not just that zero-click ordering the pizza, but also what is the consequence of that. It is also our responsibility to build in those moments of friction. Next slide, Eric. Because I think, we do not want, as designers, we do not want the human being of the future to say, clicking the mouse is the only human agency that we are capable of. There is nothing else. We're so divorced from the real world, and we are so used to just using our supposed free will by clicking, and that's the only thing we know how to do in the future. So we can't let ourselves get to that point. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh God, I need a new picture on there.
And
a picture of me.
So if you raise your hand, we'll try to get you on, and I think we'll prioritize hand raising. But also there are questions coming on the Q&A. If you don't want to talk, go there. So.
Yeah, to raise your hand, click on participants at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see the panel at the bottom, you'll see participants, and then at the bottom of that, you'll see a button that says raise hand. Let's see. So I guess I will administer that. Vivek, you asked a question at the start, so I'm gonna give priority to the next person I see here. Caribou. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I agree if I am, but I am putting you in the main room. And so, yeah, if you'd like to, and you'll need to go off mute for us to be able to hear you. There's a little mute thing at the bottom left of your screen.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for joining us. Tell us, what's your question?
Good. My question is, thank you, Apala, for that interesting talk. It actually just blew my mind. But it was with regards to the leather and the preservation aspect. You know, I work in banking and in the UX field, and I feel like we're constantly being stuck in the maintenance side. And even if business brings you in early, you're not really brought in early because you're brought in to just churn out screens.
Right.
So that they can go present to Brexco or to Expo, and so they can get more funding and stuff. However, what happens, or how does one go about to say, guys, you know, there's no need for you to go ask for 15 million. Actually go ask for less money so that we can actually test out the proof of concept and actually validate the whole thing before, you know, you do what has to be done. And then you call it innovation when it's not really innovation. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I'm in Africa, and like all the banks are doing the same thing. And me as a UX practitioner, I keep on saying, guys, there's nothing that you're doing that's authentic. If you want to see innovation, stop asking for money and actually just, you know, do what has to be done. However, it depends on who you're talking to. So how does one as a practitioner go about getting banks to actually listen to individuals like myself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, and I confess that I did anticipate a question like that. So here, I'll even show some steps. I'll say, and I'll talk through this in a second, but let me start by saying a few things that don't work, right? So what you just described doesn't work. To just say, hey, I'm just going to jump to the highest value I can, but I'm not involved soon enough to do it. The organization doesn't know I'm doing it, and I don't have enough money and support to actually do it right. So rather than, for instance, doing innovation by starting with research and coordinating with business, I'm just going to make some innovations that are based on my best guesses, based on like stuff I've learned from usability testing. Doesn't work at all, right? That's a fast path to failure. And so I don't want to have you fail, right? The whole point of this is to help you with that. So that won't work. Also, one of the things that doesn't work is what is all like, if you're already, and I'll step back to the ladder, right? If you're already doing one of these things, just continuing to do it doesn't work well. And in fact, one of the really dangerous things is doing it really well. If you're really good at prototyping, if you're really good at mocking up screens, just doing really good screens and continuing to do that is a self-defeating cycle where you are successful at that. And they're like, hey, that looked good. We like that. We kind of felt good about that. We're happy about that. That's what UX is now forever at your company, right? It's scary. It's horrifying. And so we want to avoid that. So I have a step-by-step guide. And this, by the way, I think is one of the things we really need to add to the next edition of UX, the institutionalization of UX book, because this is how we climb the value ladder. This is how we show that we're doing higher and higher value. And we need to start with the work that we're doing, but it's not just about doing it. And so here's the step-by-step thing. Step one is, yeah, I do need to do the work, but I need to do it really right. And so I want to emphasize this. This is the kind of, this is the focus, like a magnifying glass. This is the focused way that we do this, right? And so we're going to do whatever we're doing. If I'm currently doing usability testing, maybe normally they make me do it with 6 participants. You know what? I'm going to do it right this time. I'm going to do it with at least 6 per group, and maybe that's like 20 participants or 30. I'm gonna do it with more participants. Then, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be any thousands, but I need to do it as well as I can, as long as I'm doing it within the realm of what I'd call right enough, right? Then what I'm gonna do is measure the results, and I wanna emphasize in terms of ROI, right? Whatever that means at your company. For some companies, ROI is really about the impressions we leave on customers and how they feel about us. But maybe we measure that with surveys. I hate that, but it's better than nothing. It's even better if I can do something that's like conversion retention, but I want to measure it in terms of ROI, because then I can say, not only did I do this work, not only was it good, but it made us this money, right? We had a recent case study. I need to write up the case study. We had a recent case study that was one of those user interface structure projects, and that project made, can I remember? It increased that company's revenue by 47%. It was a smallish company, so that was only $3.7 million. But that's pretty good, right? So that kind of thing is really useful. Now, it's not enough just to know that, though. So this next step is key. You need to promote that, and you need to do it, by the way, in live sessions. It does not work to do it by email. Do not send out a bunch of, hey, we did this cool thing by email. No one will read it. So you need to get on the quarterly meetings for 5 minutes, or you need to do a brown bag lunch for your company or other live sessions. And you need to make sure that you don't have just UX people show up. You want to get it as broadly reaching as you can. There's more to be said about that, but that's the next step. Then the last step, and this is also really important. All of these steps are important, right? The last one is at the end of that session, in front of everyone, I need to ask to do more, and there are 2 versions. So if this was the first time I've done that, if this is the first time I've done a user interface structure, right, first time I've broken into that tier, then what I'll do is I'll say, yeah, we should do that every time. If instead this is something we do pretty regularly, but we don't move up, then then in that case, it's a better idea to say, all right, good, we do these usability tests all the time, and they're great. Or we do this kind of mock-ups all the time, and they're great. But there's a bunch of stuff I couldn't fix because I couldn't affect the navigation. So look, next time we do one of these projects, let's involve UX sooner, right? And let's do this kind of a project and give them a little preview of involving research and all of that, right? And then you can do that higher value thing. Or if it's innovation, right? That's what you're talking about. Vivek had the same thing, right? Maybe saying at that point, look, at the end of the day, this wasn't even something the users wanted. We heard that in the usability tests. And so in order to solve that, if we started deciding what we're working on by understanding the users, that would be much better. Let's plan to do that next time, right? So that's critical. And I want to say, right, we have trouble with all these things. Many companies aren't very good at measuring ROI and keeping track of that. Often UX people have a hard time looking back. The promotion thing, often we're too modest as UX people, and we need to be able to step up and do that and own that. And asking to do more. We're not always willing to do that. But doing this step-by-step thing helps a lot. One last little thing, if you're doing usability testing, this is very specific, but I mentioned before that usually the big gap is getting up to user interface structure. If you're doing usability testing, add in a what do you call it? Not a tree test.
Reverse card sort.
Thank you. Reverse card sort. Blanking on the name. Yeah. So reverse card sort just verifies really quick and easy. Hey, our current navigation structure doesn't make sense to users. If you just add that in, it's an easy way to show that. It doesn't tell you how it should be. It's not going to let you design the user interface structure, but it lets you show you that you need one. So that's the step-by-step guide. So I hope everyone wrote this down or took a screenshot or something, because this is something you really want to have. There's this parallel thing that we always want to do about UX maturity. By the way, more about that in Eric's book, The Institutionalization of UX. That's really important. But this value ladder thing we want to do in parallel in order to grow the amount of value we do. The more value the work that we provide does, the more that we get buy-in, and then we can grow that maturity side of it. And that all lets us really enrich UX. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. It helps.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. And so let's go to the next raised hand. I'm going to go straight over to that. I will promote you to panelist. And then I don't know how to pronounce your name. Sorry. Is it Carabo?
It's Carabo.
Carabo. I'm going to put you back in the other one. It'll just reset for a moment as you're going back, but that'll work. All right. Hi, welcome. You're on mute right now, but Debashis?
I can hear you. Hi, Noah. Hi, Eric. Hi, Apala. Firstly, thank you so much for bringing this to us. I really appreciate it. And I have a lot of questions, but probably I just ask you one small question around the topic that Eric started about AI and user experience. So I'm not sure because I feel that we are at the very early stage right now with AI analytics and everything coming together and don't really know how it would be like when the dust settles down. Like, so what's your take around this? Because right now we have so many patterns which are definite and established, and then we have all sorts of analytics and user inputs coming in from all sources, right? And then there is this aspect of when we start automating things, then human beings tend to, take the back seat, and probably they don't really are not in control anymore about let's take the example of driving or pilots. So in context of UX, when AI is kind of taking more control and coming to the front seat, to the driver's seat, how do you think see things falling into place, or what's your take on that?
Thanks for that. So I would say that, first of all, AI has been a long journey. It's been many decades. And what's happening now is the technology has the power, where you have like I bought this discount. It's a tiny chip the size of my thumbnail, and it has a terabyte of data. I remember 5 megabytes being a hard drive that looked like a coffee table, right? That's why AI is becoming practical. But AI is not in the driver's seat, and it won't be in the driver's seat. We're in the driver's seat. And the reason we're in the driver's seat is the key question is, what are we focusing AI on? So our job as UX people is to go, let me understand this user population. What is it that they need solved by AI? AI doesn't go, I understand this ecosystem and this is what, no. AI goes, I'm trying to solve a very specific focused question. Like, for example, are you a good credit risk? And we're the ones who need to go, hey, that's a problem that's important to think about in a number of ways. Apala, do you want to talk about the problem of AI being biased?
Yeah, sure. So, and this is, I'm sure, Devashish, you would have been reading about this also, as all of you on this Hangout, that the biases that the algorithms, which, are the foundation of all the artificial intelligence systems, the biases that the creators of the algorithms have often get embedded in the algorithms. So there's study after study showing that algorithms that are, AI systems that are used in different areas, such as, say, for talent management and personnel management, recruitment, etc., often...
Yeah, there's police stuff too with this. Yeah.
Sorry?
You've seen this where there's policing happening, where they're trying to use that to predict crime in certain areas and things. Same deal, where all of the biases get embedded in the algorithms. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why our job is to add that human element to this. So it's an exciting thing. Thank you for the question. It's a good one. And let's keep rolling.
Yep. Apala, I want to go over to the chat so I've got some of the ones in the chat. This is a pretty succinct question, Apala, for you, because it was on the subject that you were talking about. And so, sorry, it was.
How do we optimize that? That's the one, right? How do we optimize?
The one that's about the zero-click ordering. I'd like to know more about zero-click ordering, someone said. Their name is actually not in the chat. They're just MotoG. But I'd like to know more about zero-click ordering. Do you want to talk a little more about zero-click ordering, Apala?
Yeah, so though zero-click ordering was just an example I was using. It was not, I'm not really talking about zero-click ordering. I'm trying to say that the concept of facile externality would probably say, don't do zero-click ordering. Because when you do zero-click ordering, what is zero-click ordering? It's basically, I set up, in this app, I set it up so that one type of food item that I order repeatedly, I do not even have to open the app, select that food item, or even say repeat order. I don't even have to click one button saying repeat last order. I just open the app and it just orders that pizza that I order repeatedly. So I don't have to do anything except open the app. So that's what zero-click ordering is in this case. But my point was that that's not such a good thing. Maybe you want that pause of hitting the button to say, do I really want to eat another pizza? I mean, it's quite unhealthy, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the point I was trying to make. But zero-click ordering is about eliminating even the need to click, like the autoplay in the gaming systems in a casino machine.
Great. And here's another question. This might be a good one for you, Eric. This is from Surav Banerjee. The question is, if I'm not getting a chance to do field study, or my company is not supporting doing field studies, then how do I do my real-time research work?
Noah, you want to just switch Devashish to attendee?
Who?
Devashish is still on as presenter.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop that. But yeah.
All right. So basically, UX people, our job is to tailor software for our customer. And tailoring the software means understanding the customer. So the idea that you as a UX professional would be designing stuff without good data about customers, hopefully that you've personally been involved in, it's just a non-starter. And so this is a problem of institutionalization of UX, where if you're going to be in an environment, you need to be in an environment where you can do your job. And so that means access to customers, no matter how difficult it is. We work with ultra high net worth banking customers and physicians and so on, and they're difficult to get with. You still need to, or it won't be right. So I would say,
what does do?
Well, so the interesting thing, you grow your company's understanding, you move the company up the value chain, or you find a different place to work. So one of the things that's come out recently is that, we're looking at getting companies to move up the value chain. But as you think about your UX career, being in a place that lets you do high quality UX should be a significant consideration in picking a job. So I would say that, and I've seen a lot of people expressing frustration. I got my CUA, I got my CXA, I have these incredible skills, and they want me to paint screens, or they want me to spend most of my time programming. So we will all create a pressure for companies to get better at this as we go, like, are you going to let me do this work for real? Okay. No, let's get the hands up.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. So Vivek asked a question before, and I'm putting him back in the room again, but he was waiting for a while, so I'll let him go, and then I'll do the next question after.
Okay.
Vivek, you're on mute still.
Hello guys, I'm back.
All right.
Welcome back.
Firstly, thank you for teaching me this new world called screen painting. Lately, I've been doing it in the office every day. And my question is, in the design school, I felt the user was right beside me. I make conversation with him, and he's the only one who matters to me. But in the industry, I feel the user is far away, and a lot of internet stakeholders like sales guys, development guys. Before I reach him, I need to cross these guys. So I'm basically trying to understand what happens before UX and after UX.
So I think that we're talking about this issue of the kind of organization you're working for and their best practices. And so moving them forward in terms of being able to routinely go to the sales folks and say, we're going to be talking to your customers. I actually had one client who said that the research we did talking to clients was worth it and paid off, not just because of the design, but it paid for itself in the clients liking the company better because they felt listened to. So it's a positive thing to do research, and we need to present that to our customer and make it normal. Okay?
We're seeing actually other people in chat having the exact same question. I'll add to that and just say, refer you back to the steps in the value ladder. When you're doing, when you can't talk with users, when you're doing screen painting, go fine. If that's all I can do, but let me do it really right, really well. Let me measure the impact, and then let me promote that. But then when I promote it, let me finish that by saying, but I've never talked with our users, and I could do this so much better if I actually talked with them. I don't have that picture of who they are, and that's a basic thing we do in our work. And it's not even really what we call user-centered design if I'm not talking with users. So let's set up some user interviews, and let's move on at least to usability testing. Like, let's move up just a little bit, or let's move on to a user interface structure, right? Whatever that next thing is that you think you can get away with. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you.
Next person who has their hand raised has, I think that's pronounced Owen Schaffer.
Come on.
Owen Schaffer, I'm putting them in, and thank you, Vivek. I'm gonna put you back into the other.
Right. Okay, that's Noah's brother. Hey, Owen.
Is this thing working? Hello?
Yeah. Hey.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, everyone. So I just had a question. I was listening to Apala's section of this, and I was hearing a really strong warning about optimizing systems for efficiency and some of the dangers that can happen. Similarly, like if we only optimize for profit. The question is, what do we do instead? What are we optimizing systems for? Is it human happiness? Is it well-being? So I get the danger of putting everything on autoplay, and the danger of losing control. But what are the
alternatives
aspiring to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's a great question, Owen, because, I have been trying to research exactly this point, that if it's not efficiency, what is it? And I have, what I feel very inspired about at the moment is the economist Amartya Sen's work on capability, what is called the capability approach, where he did a similar shift in economics, where he moved away from measuring everything in terms of income and money to human welfare, well-being, freedom, and ultimately in being able to build your own capability and functioning. And I think that we need to do a similar transition in user experience to say, if I'm a user of a particular system or experiences.
Sorry, Owen, just go on. Sorry, Owen, go on mute because it's a little noisy there. Although I love hearing my grandkid. Go ahead.
So, at the end of using a particular system and having a certain experience, am I building my own capability systems? At the end of all that, am I understanding the debit? Am I in a better position building my own capability about that so that I make my decisions about getting away from unfreedoms, as Amartya Sen says, which is a lack of access and transparency. We've got to now measure our systems in terms of how much capability we actually make a human user build when they use our systems and the experiences we design, and how more freedom and human, how much more well-being can they experience. That is where I am at.
Thanks, Apala. You were breaking up a little bit, but so the idea is that as UX professionals, we're really crafting the future world. So the way that human beings are changing is not by natural selection anymore, because people don't die as much like they did 3,000 years ago. But our job as UX professionals is to craft what the next generation of human being is like based on augmentation with the technology. It's already amazing. I mean, it's like if I looked at us from 1977 when I started doing UX, where we can just any information anywhere, I can connect and know what people are talking, and we're all talking together. the UX community, the CUAs around the world, having a conversation like this would have been unimaginable. And so very cool stuff. Noah, we could take a couple more questions here.
Yeah, there's a couple about Agile, and I want to say just a 2-second thing that there's a question here about like, can you do the whole UX process with Agile? Yes, you can, you should, and you'll get better designs and all of that. It empowers things. It reduces redundancy. It reduces the amount of rework. It's yes. Long story short, maybe we should do a whole other session about it. But there was another question about kind of how do you work with Agile without doing big design up front? And the answer to that is what I said about the user interface structure. User interface structure means you're designing just the navigation, which functions kind of like the blueprint. So you're not designing everything, but you're designing the blueprint up front, and that lets everything else fill into that blueprint. And so that's the long story short about that, but I think we may need a larger conversation about that. I'm seeing some other hands raised.
We're going to, Noah, just
I know, we're running out of time.
One cool thing about that, we can go over a little bit also.
Okay.
I've got a customer I'm talking to, and it's a company that makes software that supports Agile. And their software was built with Agile. And their software now has almost 1,000 screens. And no one can find anything in it. So unless you do the process from a UX viewpoint to make a container that works, that fits with customers, you can build within it using Agile. But yeah, even if, no matter how good you are at Agile is not a wonderful thing from a UX viewpoint. Okay,
we have to work to integrate with it. I wouldn't say it's not a wonderful thing, but it has some challenges to integrate with it.
Exactly.
Xavier, welcome. I'll ask you to go off mute so we can hear you.
Hello all.
I'm here.
I'm from India. Okay. Here is my question. Actually, I'm doing a product based for globalized customers. So how should I do the user research? They may be in different locations because they are in a global way. Other than the SEO
I can tell you're from India because of the light switch behind you. And Apala, go ahead. Why don't you talk about that? I think it's your space.
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of user research, if your participants, if your users are in different locations, etc., there are multiple ways. I mean, the best is, of course, the most ideal way is if you can go to those places, right? So in HFI, we regularly do multi-location research. And our philosophy is that we will not do any design unless we have access to the end user in our various research cycles. We don't do just one cycle. We do an initial one, then we do validation cycles. In every cycle, we go where the users are. And so it's common for us to do, if it's just India, we'll do 6 cities, we'll do 8 cities, we'll travel to, if it's different cities across the world, then again, we can do 10 countries. We recently did one which was across 3 countries, but we go to those places and we do the research there. But then if you have to take a shortcut, I mean, better than not doing the research is use remote methods then. And we've done that too once in a while. So now the technology is much better. So you can, like a Hangout like this, like Zoom, or of course Skype, or even WebEx and phone, you can do remote research where your participants are somewhere, you are not traveling, you are where you are located. But all you need to do is users of the profile that you need in those particular locations. And they, depending on what kind of location, if it's a location where fraudulent stuff does not happen, users do not, you don't have users who are actually not fitting your profile, but they're pretending. There are some countries where that happens, some countries it doesn't. If it's a country where it doesn't happen, you don't have to even bother about a venue where the participant has to come and sit and be able to converse with you via any of these platforms. They can just do it from home. But if it is a country where the risk of fraud is high and you cannot afford to not get the right data because it's your one opportunity, then you need a venue where your recruiter can arrange for a venue, bring the participant in there, And from that venue, you can connect with the participant remotely. But so there are only these two ways that you can do research. Anything else is like sending some surveys and all, very not okay. Very not okay. I mean, they may be okay where quantitative methods are needed at very early market exploration or much later stage of finding price points, etc., but not when you're trying to understand why does a user think in a certain way, why does a user use this or not use this, or will use what I'm trying to propose or not use. Those whys cannot be answered in any reliable manner through quantitative remote surveys. So that's my take.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll go to the next person. This is Savio. Thank you, Xavier. And Savio, you'll need to go off mute. We're not hearing you yet. There's a little button at the bottom left of the screen.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Nice.
Hi guys, this is Savio from Mumbai. I have done the CUA, CXA, both the courses from HFI.
Good.
Helping me a lot, definitely. And coming to my question, I mean, we have spoken about future-proofing the UX career, and the webinar is about UX career and the AI. I actually am working between on the UX layer somewhere. I'm working with the AI and the persuasive methods basically. So my question is like, do we have? I mean, HFI has come up with usability methodology, the PET terminologies, and the methods. So do we have any information that you would want to share on how to identify the extent of AI, and do we have the methodology defined for it?
Interesting. So in a sense, what you did in your CUA program, giving you the foundation, how do I make something easy? And the CXA program, the strategic stuff, the innovation, the persuasion engineering, as well as the institutionalization, those things set you up to deal with. Because AI is just another tool. So we have a whole we have conversational interfaces. It's funny how somebody said, well, wait a minute, you know, there are things like Alexa, and that's not a real interface. Well, of course it is. It's just a voice-based interface. And the same principles apply. I need to be able to have a mental model of what I can do with Alexa. I need to have a structure of the commands that I can learn. I need to help people to learn those commands, all the memory stuff. I'm just putting in an exercise where that's what we'll be doing for everybody coming in. But the memory principles you learn apply to how you build a conversational interface. The AI capability is very much about how you fulfill specific needs. So whatever technology comes along, whether we're building space stations or whether we're building vehicles that manage climate change, all those things that are new problems coming out, you have the foundation now to be thinking about those things and working in them. And so you're going to find that as you look at the questions of how you manage AI and have cobot systems, right, where we have a user working with a robot, basically. Cobot's a good term to have. So as we design those systems that control AIs, and as we design systems where AIs help people, you got the skills to look at that. Okay.
Okay. So just to extend that question, it's like supposing like taking Apala's example of the driver sitting on a seat and reacting to a particular incident that happens, like hitting a brakes possibly, which he is delayed because he is busy with some other stuff in the background. So how do we identify that whether the AI should actually control that braking system, or do we have anything that takes us to that extent of identification that these are the things that we should be taking care of building for? Do we have those any methodology for that, or we should be using the same research methodology and testing things to get onto that?
It's the same exact methodology. I have a human being within an ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay.
That human being is going to function in a given way. I'm expecting reaction time to go up with a vigilance decrement. I'm expecting reaction time to go up with distractions. Now, is that okay? What are the consequences of that? Right? So our job is to have, and this is why we need to get user research, because we have to really understand, not just from fantasy, not from our personal experience, know thy user for they're not you, right? But from a systematic process, what is that ecosystem and how do I optimize? Okay?
Understood.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right. By the way, if anyone else, I'm seeing a lot of other questions in chat and Q&A, and we can do those, but I think we're prioritizing the folks who have their hands raised. So please raise your hand.
By the way,
it's very
clear to me that we're going to have I think we should have the next Hangout. I'm excited. I think people have enjoyed this, and I'm still seeing we're 10 minutes late and there's still 100 people there. So I'm going to say that the next Hangout might be on Agile.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of questions on that.
There's a lot of questions on Agile, so let's do that.
I have a lot to say about it too. Jennifer, you're on mute, so I'll ask you to, there we go. You can ask a question.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Gracie from Des Moines, Iowa, USA. I work as a senior UX consultant, and I go in and I help companies in many different ways with their user experience design. Recently, I've been helping companies with integrating UX into Agile. And what we're finding is we can kind of go in and do an analysis, an assessment, determine their UX maturity from the stage that they're at. And I know there's, like Jacob Nielsen has, I think, 10 stages of UX maturity. I've seen some other ones out there. The one I like to use is about 6. And I kind of like to compare, you know, the level 5, 6 UX maturity organizations to Amazon, Google, Facebook, those companies where it's really ingrained in their SDLC. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, after we've kind of done the UX roadmap, the maturity roadmap, and we figured out where they are and where they need to be, and we give them maybe a checklist of UX tools and artifacts that they can create, or activities that they can do in order to increase their user experience design within their SDLC. Where do we go after that? Where, you know, if they're not necessarily buying into it, how do we push them to kind of, I mean, I'm brought in as an external consultant to help companies with this, and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. I mean, we just continue to evangelize and say, you know, you have to look at this. If you have software that your users complain about, how do you fix the problem? How do you fix the software if you're not willing to do these things like the user interviews and the journey mapping and understanding and doing those storyboarding, especially for some of those clients where they're starting to use RPA and AI to interact with both systems and robots. And also, you know, there's some material things that they may handle. They may be in a warehouse and they're using that type of technology. Where do we go after we figure out where they are and we tell them what they need to do?
So Jennifer, hi. By the way, I'm 2 hours drive away in Iowa. And I'm coming there to Des Moines to dance tango. So one of these weekends soon, there's a big dance. But listen, the key thing is the executive championship. Mm-hmm. And in reality, you don't go very far in moving up the ladder unless you can get executives to buy in. And that's about education. It's about showing them the numbers, but it's also about showing them the technology. So it seems odd, but even seeing little small studies, a principle like, you know, chromatic aberration or all caps or those kinds of things make it concrete for them that it's an engineering discipline. Once they get that and they see the ROI of it, then we need to present them with the idea that they need the capability to do it. And there are a bunch of models, And they're all useful in different ways. They're models that talk about the cultural acceptance. And so a company like Google, wonderful at cultural acceptance. There are aspects of what you physically do. And then there's other models like the one that we have, which is really about, what capabilities do you have? Do you have methods? Do you have standards? Do you have things like that? So being able to drive people and companies that way is about educating executives. That's the whole key. And for a company where there is no executive champion, and there are a lot fewer of them today, but for companies where there are no executive champions, your whole business, every project you do is about showing executives the value. All right.
Which, by the way, plays into the value ladder, because that's how we show the executives the value. So that's part of why that's such a thing that ties in to that maturity model thing. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Good question. For those of you guys who are who have questions, I see lots and lots of good questions, and we still have 100 people, so I think we're going to stay on for a bit longer. For those of you who have questions, if you want to be bowled up, you have to click on the participants thing, and then at the bottom of the list of participants, you can raise your hand there, and that'll raise your hand. That'll make sure your question, that'll put you to the top of the list for questions getting answered. If we run out of the other folks, then we'll go to those, but I don't know that we're going to get to any of those. We've had a lot of people raising hands, so I recommend raising your hand. We'll put you on video, as we are with Sharwari. Sharwari, you're on mute now, so I'll ask you to go off mute so we can hear you, and then you can ask your question. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I was just wondering if you're caught up in a conflict where the company or the client expects a very quantitative or a very financial gain from the revised UX, but you as a designer are socially responsible and conscious of the impact, and you want a more qualitative outcome from your design. How do you deal with this? Because the company usually demands a very financial gain from your design.
I'm thinking that's an Apala question.
Well, I think it's a question all of us have.
As our thought leader.
But I am on a project like that, or questions like that come up.
Apala, you're going to have to kill your video because it's just, your voice is breaking up.
Is the quantitative? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I've just stopped the video. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, is there an inherent conflict between the quantitative results that, or quantitative evidence that, return on investment, etc., that is being looked for, and the qualitative aspect, or the tangible conflict connection? Then it's a matter of convincing the client that, yeah.
So Apala, I think you're breaking up to the point where this won't work. But I'm going to say that, Shawari, that's a really difficult question. And it's something we've been struggling with, because at the end of the day, you have to serve your client. And so you have to give them an economic solution that works for them. At the same time, we want to be responsible, and so driving towards being more inclusive, driving towards taking care of people. There's a dark view of the future where AI combined with persuasion engineering makes us all slaves to a click, or even an automatic. It automatically gambles for me. It automatically feeds me. and we become fat and poor, and our society comes apart. So it's our job as UX people, I think, and this is something that Apala has been thinking a lot about, and we're all struggling with here at HFI. We've been driving towards efficiency, driving towards profit, but if we use those heuristics, just like the AI that does policing seems to pick up the biases and suddenly we're stopping Black people, or it picks up the biases and suddenly we are not giving loans to a minority group, right? We need to be alert to those things, and we need to help to make that work for society and for our client, because at the end of the day, karma works.
Awesome. Great. So we don't have any other people who've raised hands. We have a lot of other questions by text. I'm noticing several in the Q&A field. I see one here from Mohan Talluri that's more kind of a in the nitty-gritty, in the weeds of things, in the fray, kind of a UX question. And Eric, I'm curious about your perspective on this. So he's saying that there's a growing opinion in the UX field that hi-fi prototypes are really what you should do after initial research. So skipping the lo-fi prototypes, right? And so he's also saying it's easier to get buy-in with those hi-fi prototypes. So I'm just curious about your take on that.
Great question. So our underlying principle is test early and test often, right? We all know that we'd rather get feedback quickly and improve it rather than wait to the end and do a great test with a high fidelity prototype and find out that, well, we have to scrap the last 3 months of work. That said, progressively doing a hi-fi prototype is cheaper and easier. So as the hi-fi prototype becomes cheaper and easier, of course we want that. But the guiding principle is I want to test to make sure the idea is right, to make sure the structure is right, then to make sure the detailed design is right, not wait. So good point, but it's what we're really seeing is the ability to mock it up in high fidelity is just getting much cheaper and faster.
So as it gets cheaper and faster, you think it may make sense to skip some of that lo-fi stage, perhaps?
Yeah, so why would I test on a napkin when as quick as I could draw it on a napkin, I can put it on the screen?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think the other component of that also is how, same thing, but how quickly you can change it once you've made it, because that ability to...
Right, so it's becoming really easy to do that, and we're soon going to see a time where we design it, we mock it up, and it goes to market with a click. So, you know, certainly at least at the presentation layer, it'll just hook to APIs and you'll be able to, you know, have that system designed by the UX people, really.
Yeah. Cool. This next question I think is good for Apala. I've clicked to unmute you, Apala. I hope that works. So this question is from, and I think I'm pronouncing, this is going to be, I'm going to butcher this name, but I'll try, right? It looks like it's Raghu Kripa Kanthredi, who says, I was asked to design the product the way the stakeholders want without user research. Oh, wait, that was the wrong one. Sorry, wait. Sorry, I'm going to ask the question I was actually looking at. I haven't reviewed that question first. So the one I actually wanted to ask from Arva Adams. From Arva Adams, I'm thinking about how positive friction could help with the current trends in reactive and unuseful discourse on social media. So in you know, ugly things on social media, how could positive friction help with that? Could we make people think before they click send?
I really wish that's such a good idea.
Yeah, that's part of why I wanted to ask it. Any particular thoughts
I'm
about
not so
it?
sure, but
Yeah, I like it.
I mean, wouldn't it be great if before you shared, it popped up, like even a Google search against it so you could see if it was fake? Like, are you sure you want to share this nonsense? And maybe who it was from, not just a name of a company, but anyway.
Since I started asking that other question before, I think it is a good question. I just wanted to see it first. This is a similar question we talked about before about where they're not giving the person the opportunity to do real user research. And so this person that I tried to do the name before, butchered it. But Raghu Prabhakant Reddy said, I was asked to design the product the way the stakeholders want without user research, right? That thing I mentioned. And then when asked about the same, they said, please do it my way or look for an alternative job. So they told her him or her to do it their way or walk. And so this person is asking, how do I tackle and convince the management about user research? They said, P.S. They provided a persona. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would say is personas are for amateurs. So professional UX people don't work with personas. We create personas to tell executives about a user profile, but we need the detail that underlies that user profile. We need to know, is it 51% men or 99% men? That makes a difference to our design and so on. And this is the question that I think is very right in the field, that as people have good training, like the CUAs that are here and the CXAs, you can see whether your job is doing things properly. Are you in an environment where you can succeed? And I would tend to pick places and ask for that. And that will pressure companies to have better practices. Once you're in a company, if they won't do it right, we edge them towards doing it better. Noah talked about how to do that. Showing that we can do good work, showing that we can add value bit by bit, so we patiently move them along. It does take years for a company to do things well. And then if they're not doing a good job and you got great skills, look for a company, send a note to Apala, and find a place to work where they're doing world-class work.
Awesome. We have a couple of people with hands raised, so turning back to those. And Hardeep, I'll ask you to go off mute before you speak so we can hear you. There's a little button at the bottom left of your screen.
Hey, hi.
Hey.
So my question is really simple. So I just wanted to ask whether we can build a AI for UX.
Yeah, and that was really the crux of what I started with. And I believe we cannot do that. We can use AI as a tool to help customers. So I can, and I've done that. I've said, okay, banking customer, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to understand the current emotion of the customer and adapt the interface to them based on that. And AI can help me do that better. But will AI take over the UX gig? Nah, because I think that it's too much about understanding people's mental models, their worlds. It's too complicated, right? Yeah. So, you know, if you're designing a movie theater, you need to know that some people have a broken leg and they're going to have a seat where they can sit and with their legs sticking out. And the AI won't know that people have broken legs.
Okay.
So
our future is bright then.
Our future is very bright. I recommend people go into UX because it's future-proof, which is maybe the lesson of the session.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Hardeep. All right, let's go to the next person who has their hand raised. And Hardeep, I'll be removing you from this part of it, so I'll put you back.
Hi. Am I audible already?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah, hi, Purna.
Yeah, hi. So I'm from India, and I have a very simple sort of application-related question about AI. So my question is, what do you think is going to be that industry or field which is going to take AI to the masses? Because as a layman or as an everyday UX designer, you still don't get a lot of projects where AI is the sought after technology because it's still kind of expensive or it's still being explored with. So what do you think is that going to be that one path-breaking industry where AI will become synonymous with our lives?
You know, I think that it's going to be almost every industry.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to think of an industry where AI won't matter. So we're starting to look at AI helping call centers. We're starting to look at AI supporting banking. We're starting to see AI supporting, you know, e-commerce, obviously, right? So there's many environments where it will help, it will mostly help quietly. So it'll go step by step. So at first you'll see a physician being assisted by big data, so they have better evidence-based design. And so they'll go, I'm seeing this kind of cancer, and they put it into an oncology program that looks at all the data and all the results and all the treatment modalities and says, try this, and then gets feedback and makes a better choice next time. So those kinds of things are coming in, and it will insidiously get stronger and stronger, which is mostly a good thing because we'll cure cancer better and better.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's see. I'm not on mute, am I? Good. Okay. Cool. So more questions. So that's all the people who have their hands raised. We have more questions in chat. So a couple of people have asked this question about patterns with innovation. That's kind of interesting. And so if I'm understanding the question that they're asking, they're basically saying when you're doing something that's a totally new thing, how do you have patterns for it? That's basically the gist of it, right? If you have something where there isn't an existing product or service, I don't have existing data, existing users, how do I have patterns for that?
So what I want to, and I think we're about time now where we can wrap this up. We're still at 88 people, thank you, but we're an half hour over. But I think, we've seen that we need a session on Agile like this. And then I think, Apala, we need a session on innovation, UX and innovation.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few things about that.
We'll commit to those two things and thank everybody for coming to the session. I think you heard some very interesting points in the session that have to do with your UX career. The fact that it's a bright future, it's not going away by robots, the fact that there's a ladder to climb. If you look at our CUA program, that's really about doing those core things. And I believe that you should have that just like you need to be able to do basic math before you do physics. So I think that those abilities to design a screen, to do a usability test are very core. And then moving up, the CXA programs about that, where we can do the fascinating stuff with persuasion engineering, innovation, omnichannel strategies, and move up the value chain. So we'll see that. And then I think Apala's point is maybe the most important, that our job in the world is to bring technology in a way that works well for people. And it could easily be a disaster. No, I just stopped sharing.
Okay, I was just going to show the thing you were talking about, the CUA CXA thing, but that's cool.
That's okay. And so our job in the UX field is to help craft the next generation of how people will be. So my grandkids, who you can hear in the background with Owen and Noah, you kept Rosie quiet, but as we look at how they're going to live, the toddlers of today, we're crafting what their lifestyle will be like. And so let's not just do it in a way that maximizes profit and results in the very short term, but let's do it in a way that develops the kind of quality of life that we'd really like to see. Thank you for being with us, and we'll do another Hangout just like this. Maybe we'll do same time, same station next month. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.